How's it going, guys? So let's just continue the Kenneth Minogue novel. Not novel, his political philosophy introductory book by the Oxford series. So just make sure you're watching this so sequentially, because the previous video it talked about his critique of the Personalis Politica, and in this video we're just gonna do a historical survey with the Greeks. Then we're gonna do the Romans, then the Christians, then the modern state. So it's all gonna be very sequential, guys. You have to make sure you follow that. And alright, so today I'm just gonna go and read it, and then I'll break it down, guys, because I feel the essay is long and I don't want us to run out of time. So book chapter by chapter breakdown, Kenneth Minogue, Politics, Introduction, and Chapter 2, The Classical Greeks, How to be a Citizen, what I've learned of the Greek sense of identity, where they are equal despite having a difference in wealth, beauty, and intelligence. Greeks view people as rational, hence equal. The only relation between rational people is that of persuasion and not coercion command. Greeks reject the use of violence in favor of reason. Alright, guys, so first, what Minogue is trying to say is that people in classical times, we can divide it by Western and Eastern, and he's saying that most Eastern people were ruled by despots. I don't want to name the countries that he fought this to be the case, but he thinks like a lot of different countries in the East were just ruled by tyrant who had absolute power, and he ruled because of his will or caprice, which is pretty much that, like, however he felt, he just ruled. Well, Greek people thought that this wasn't the case, and everybody was rational, so you shouldn't like force people to do things, and violence is wrong, and you have to persuade people through your use of reason. Alright, and then Greeks obeyed the law and enjoyed following the law. It's interesting since this is virtue ethics style of morality. So I know a lot of you guys who are into the whole analytic philosophy, you know that there was a push to follow virtue ethics. Right now I can't really name the exact people who were trying to do it, but it seems that after utilitarianism, consequentialism, and like Kantian ethics, there's actually virtue ethics which took over and became popular. The idea that you should enjoy doing something moral, and Minogue is saying that the Greeks did this. Like, not only did they follow, he used the example of Socrates. Socrates not only followed the law, but he enjoyed following the law. No, it's adding emotion to their rational action. But it's a cool detail because you see how time evolves. You know, like Greeks used to have this virtue ethics, and a lot of people lost it. Middle Ages, most likely, and then now it's been revived, and virtue ethics is considered good. So you see how the evolution comes. And I know some critics might be like, could you list everybody who didn't follow virtue ethics? But for the sake of time, I can't right now, but you guys get the idea. Greeks focused on the agora, which was assembly where Greeks debated about politics. Open criticism is to have been an innovation created by the Greeks that was not present in more Orientalist societies where commands were given. So pretty much what he's doing is he's saying that Orientalist society, and I know Edward Said, for all you guys who follow me and are into the Middle East, this is just like an overview. You know, we're not trying to get all the answers, but he's saying that Orientalist societies were ruled by commands, and harmony was very important. So everybody knew their place, and harmony was the utmost value. While Greeks, Romans later, and Italians, English, like all the people who followed them, like they were ruled by reason, and they weren't following commands. Like they were just persuaded. The Greeks were persuaded to follow the law by their equals, and they weren't following like there wasn't a dictator or like a tyrant saying, okay, you do this and that just because that's the way the world is and we need to maintain harmony. It was more that people just followed those who were able to persuade them, and we are going to see that persuasion with the sophists later, how they would teach young students to learn the art of persuasion. So Minogue criticizes. Here I feel it's not a criticism but observations that I've seen, that he isn't too fond about Greek people. So Greeks were less politically correct when it came to slavery. Greeks believed that slaves were defective in rationality compared to masters. So Greeks, most of them thought that slaves were just defective. Therefore, masters should rule over slaves because they weren't that capable of reason. So Minogue, because of modern sensibilities, he's saying like I disagree with that. I also agree with him that like I don't buy with slavery. Like I don't agree with it. So Greeks believed that women were less rational than men, and were relegated to the domestic sphere. Women were incapable of combat, hence they deemed unsuitable for politics, which was closely relating to waging war. So this is something as well as the Romans. Both the Romans and the Greeks were very warfare-oriented people. And Minogue is saying that Greeks quickly realized that women didn't have that strength to wage war, to battle against enemies. So they said, okay, so women are going to be relegated to the domestic sphere and men are going to be the ones that are battling. If we think about it, that's a way of reasoning. And look, Greeks were very smart, like probably like some of the smartest people. So they were highly imaginative and could conceive of women who fought wars. And this is one of my favorite words now. Descartes used it, this idea of conception. And so Greeks could conceive that women could fight wars in the Lyastra. And some Greeks wrote about women fighting wars. So look, guys, Greek society, and he's saying as well, Minogue, that they were a bit so advanced in their reason that they could conceive many of the things that we have now, like women serving in the military or women fighting wars. He's saying that Greeks already knew this, that this could be possible, but because of the reason they choose not to pursue that line of thought, but they thought it existed. So that was really cool. I really like that. It shows how ahead were the Greeks. So Greeks believed that citizenship was exclusively to a small group of free adult males. And Greeks weren't the only one, guys. For those of you who studied the American Constitution, which I much studied as well, is the idea that only a small group of free, and they add that term white later, like free white males. I don't think Greeks view themselves as a race, so I just won't use that term white. So free adult males were the only one who could rule, and everybody was relegated. So some Greeks have a view of realism, like Cleon for rebels should be punished by killing all men and selling the women and children to slavery. Meanwhile, other Greeks like Diodotus argued against the view of ruthlessness. He believed that they couldn't have a life-death struggle each time they had a revolt. This is in contrast with despotism. So, guys, and this is very interesting because the idea of despotism is harmony in society. And if you have a harsh ruler, he would just punish people who revolt, like people who disagree. He would just kill all the men and sell the women and children to slavery. And this is a school of realism that some Greeks advocated for. But it wasn't as popular as the other view, which was of Diodotus, that he thought clemency was better because it would discourage a society of debate, argument, if they always punish people who disagree with them. Like it would encourage this sort of like much more oppressive society. So they said it's fine to disagree. Like you, and I feel most Greek people believe in that you can disagree, you can revolt, you can riot, you have a right to do the right to protest. I guess, and don't quote me on that, but it's mostly me trying to understand, conceptualize, and not fancy this idea of what he's trying to say. Alright, so Minogue criticizes the Greek belief that everything at war was a result of the liberty design, which was passed down to the modern world. So Greeks and other people had this idea that since all the free citizens got together, they planned, and then this belief got spread that there's always, I don't want to say invisible hand, but that's another term, I think Adam Smith, but it's the idea that everything happens because it was designed that way, like the planners, quote unquote, have absolute power, when I don't think this is true, and Minogue also doesn't believe this is true. So Greeks disliked Oriental despotism. Minogue acknowledges that Greeks were different from the Anglos, and you guys know Anglos, they were immensely different from us in their religion, their costumes, and their conception of human life. So even if, and I feel like this is honesty of Minogue, because he's not saying like, oh, Anglos and Greeks are the same. He's saying they have some similarities. But the meaning of life was to practice human rationality. And Greeks were even more rational than Romans, because Romans, the meaning of life was their family and spreading their empire, while these guys, they were all into rationality. Greeks warned against succumbing to the passions. They were descending to lower forms of being. I think this might be a bit too harsh, you know. And maybe in the future I will write about passions, but it seems Greeks just view all passions as wrong, rationality as the only good. But I feel like our modern era, maybe progressivism, or some forms of liberalism redeem the passions, and I think this is something that needs to be explored a lot. The secret of life was human self-knowledge. Self-expression means the focus on law and public policy. The main voices of the Agora Assembly were primarily aristocrats or leaders who had a lot of supporters. So guys, here I feel Greek divided the same between oligarchic states and democratic states, and this is what's later being said, but it wasn't a complete democracy where everybody was equal. It was more, I would say, an imperfect democracy where aristocrats or people with power had more say than other citizens, or just other people in general. And Greeks seem to have invented both politics and history, and rhetoric ability to persuade an audience seems to be of high importance to the ancient Greeks. Rhetoric also involves swaying a popular audience. So Greeks put a lot of effort in trying to teach their young people rhetoric, so they could teach, and this is a concept of sophist. They could teach others about rhetoric, how to persuade an audience, how to persuade a popular audience. And honestly, guys, for every point I could just go on and on, but I'm trying to give you guys a summarized view so that you, if you're learning this book as well, like, you can have it. So he's saying that real difference in the Greek world was oligarchic state, which favored the rich and powerful, and democratic states, which favored the poor. And I guess states means cities, so there were different Greek cities. The latter was thought as unstable and violent. And as I've been saying, guys, I don't think democracy is the best system. I think some sort of meritocracy might be the best, but like, I feel like the love of democracy, it's a more of a modern conception of democracy. So maybe Puritan influence, perhaps, because they all talk about modesty and this idea. So even modesty in thought can be an argument, and I will write about this some other time. So Greeks believe that institutions could be set up to break the recurrent cycles and allow long-term stability. So then Greeks had this theory of cycles, the idea that, and I have it down there, but the idea that every system devolves into another system, but the way to break the cycles was to separate the different powers. And guys, I will skip this because it's very convoluted, but the theory of balanced constitution. So the main idea here is just that Greeks were trying to find a way to balance the powers, and I think Romans later were able to establish this system. I already read ahead, and so I'm confident that Romans had a sort of solution to the balance of powers that Greeks were struggling with. And he gives an example of modern England, where you have monarchs, lords, and commons, and they all have a sort of balance. Though he says that the Constitution of England, like, is just too far removed from this, so it isn't like the ideal example. He's just giving like some ideas. And some words so you guys should know: insomnia, democracy, phalanx is a military formation, and he says women weren't capable of that. Phalanx, notionally in the Constitution, some Greeks, like women or slaves, were not part of the discussion. So Greek was a democracy notionally, like it was in theory, but in reality it was just ruled by wealthy people. Oikia, and this is the concept of the family, and police, nexus. So guys, some questions to think about, because we're running out of time, guys, and this is just a summary view. What is the Constitution? What is the purpose of the Constitution? And it seems to eliminate the powers of the office holders. Okay, so guys, so this is what I wanted to get at. So what were the cycles? Polyphus said monarchies led to tyrannies, tyrannies led to aristocracies, aristocracies led to oligarchies, and oligarchies lead to democracies. And then in order to like destroy that mob rule, you have to get another monarch. Like, comment, and subscribe, guys. See you in the next video.